Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fired Up with CJ show. We've been having a fascinating conversation with Paul Selig about his most recent book, Alchemy, Beyond the Known. This is part two of a trilogy. And in the previous segments, we were talking about, moving to understanding who we truly are, our true nature.
Hmm.
And in the second segment, we talked about, what do you do the day in, day out versions of Paul and CJ? How do we get to a point of moving past fear into
Hmm.
kind of a higher octave of living, higher vibration?
Hmm. Hmm.
And now it's like, okay, let's really embody this and go through the alchemical process.
Hmm.
My own experience, and you had said that that's been challenging for you.
Yeah.
I can tell you about my own shit show, but I'd like to hear
Hmm.
about yours first.
My shit show. I've been through this before, um, through living certainly, but also through the process of channeling. And all of a sudden, everything that I thought I knew is sort of goes out the window. And when I was channeling at the Esalen Institute, which is a place that I frequently work at, assuming that they would bring through a book because there was a deadline, and also when I have an audience of students for say 7 or 9 days straight, it's like they can get a lot done. They'll do 80 pages in a 5-day workshop, and I love
Wow.
it because yeah, they're lecturing at least 2 hours a day, and the book gets done in a matter of days as a result of that. So I was sort of hoping it would happen, and I started this workshop. They didn't lecture. It was a weekend workshop, and then I thought, okay, maybe they'll do it in the 5-day workshop. And I did the first night of the 5-day workshop, and they didn't do book, and I'm like, okay, whatever. I wake up the next morning, I check my email because I'm a nerd, and it's the first thing that I do. Like, I'm in bed checking my email, and I got news that a friend of mine from my academic life, I worked in academia for many many years, had taken his life.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And
Oh.
yeah, it was, well, he's somebody that I loved and valued. He was a real anchor for me in my
Mm.
in my career. Somebody that I looked to for advice, and was one of my favorite people when I think about it. And it was
Mhm.
the last person I would have expected, last person. And I went to channel and before my students in shock. I was like,
Mm.
half an hour later, I'm sitting in front of, 50 people or 70 people. And the guys started to deliver the book. It
Wow.
was the first session. That's when they did it. I was so off the rails that I couldn't have cared less what came out of my mouth. And I have to say, so much stuff came to the surface, not because that was just the first thing.
Mm.
It was a series of things. And I really couldn't believe it. There was a time towards the end of the book when I just went, this is just too crazy. Like, they should put a warning on this book cover. Read this book and deal with your shit. But I have to say, I went through it.
Mm.
And I came out of it, and I'm still coming out of it, frankly, different.
Mm.
Not perfect. Maybe I am perfect. Maybe we're all perfect, because the guides would say. So the process of delivering the book, and the funny thing is, I just assumed the book made no sense. It's like I would look at the lectures when they were transcribed, maybe put them together. I didn't read the whole book
Mm.
until I had to turn it in and I had to proof it. And I went, wow, this seems to make sense. And then the publisher called me and he said, I think this is, I ran into him and he said, this is the most powerful book of the series so
Mm.
far. And I was like, really? And then I sat in a recording studio here in Maui about a month and a half ago, and I did the audiobook. And that's when I really read it. And I was fairly astonished by the book because of how beautiful and loving it was, and how coherent, and how it
Mhm.
addressed all this stuff.
Mm.
Like, and I understood what happened. Somewhere in the period when they were channeling the book, they said something to the effect of, it was in a workshop. I don't know that it was in the book, But they say, you go up to the upper room, which is this higher level of consciousness, and you have all these little black stones in your pockets. And these
Yes.
are all your little fears and resentments and hatreds and all of these things that are misunderstood.
Mm,
And they said, what's happening right now is you're about to get turned upside down.
mm,
And all of these stones are going to start falling out of your pockets, because as long as you're carrying those stones in your pockets, you are tied to the source of them, which is in the low vibrational field.
mm.
And
Oh, wow.
that's why you keep going up and down the damn stairs. I'm going to
Mm,
go to the upper room, and then somebody insults me right back downstairs. So you
mm,
see, I go to the upper room, I get frightened right back downstairs. And unless I'm willing to sort of release those attachments to the lower, I'm going to continue to have this experience. And what they're trying, I believe, I'm going to let them talk in a minute. What they're doing with this is to give us a foundation up there,
mm,
so that we're not ricocheting or operating like, pinballs in a pinball machine, where everything is reactive.
mm,
And this doesn't deprive of us of our humanity or our feelings or any of that. It's a way of being, I suspect, that allows the presence of the divine to be participatory to our being, and not
mm,
this thing that we have to run to when the shit hits the fan.
mm,
It becomes, it's
mhm,
the idea, I'll say it, I'm not there yet, but in God I live and move and have my being. That's what they're teaching. That's it.
mm,
It's a
mm.
way of being,
Mm.
agreement to source. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So that's what I would
And
say.
say it again. In God, I.
Live and move and have my being. I think that's New
Mm,
Testament. I don't know. I was raised an atheist,
mm,
strangely enough.
mm,
So yeah, that's what that's what I understand they're going towards
mm,
here.
mm.
That's the teaching. Now I can ask them. I don't remember what your question was. What's the process of getting there? I can see if they want to say anything,
Yeah,
or if
why
you
is
want to
it
ask.
so challenging? So I had a
Sure.
similar, like, have dark stones in my pocket,
Yeah.
unexpected things happen, and, this weird
Totally.
cough as evidence of just out of the blue, this very unseemly cough comes out of me.
Mhm.
I've been yelling and screaming in my basement, letting go of darkness. I mean, it's been actually kind of unpleasant.
Yeah. That was me. Yeah. That was me.
Crying, yelling,
Yep.
cursing, crying again, grief stricken. Like it's just been like it's like anything that I hadn't expressed that was deep in my toxic tank has come out like a oozing pussy wound. And it feels awful.
That's exactly was my. That's where I was after the whole damn book. That was it. I mean, it was something. And I don't feel that I'm there now. I may be back there again, but I don't know. It may be different. I, I'm having this funny experience. I was, and I'm only sort of seeing how sort of stuck I was now, that I'm not feeling as stuck. I was touring for 5 years. I was on the road pretty much. I left my academic life, which was scary because that was my insurance and my retirement, and all of those things was very attached to a job I'd had for 25 years.
Mhm.
And then suddenly there I am channeling, on this unlikely event in front of all these people. And I was channeling in Costa Rica, and consequently I didn't have much of a life in New York. I had my
Mm,
dog, I had my takeout. You can get anything delivered in New York. I had a lot of takeout food. Wasn't agreeing with me. It was an easy way to live, but I was always tired, from having traveled. It was 3 times a month I was on the road, and I was channeling in Costa Rica, and New York shut down. Literally shut
mm,
down while I was there, and I didn't know what to do. And a friend said, come to Maui and
mm.
found me a little tiny house to stay in. And 24 hours later, I'm in a tiny house in Maui, and all I left with was a suitcase to go away for the week. And I
Wait,
left
because you're going to Costa Rica one
for
week.
a week. My dog was at a dog sit. My dog was with a sitter. I've been here for 4 months with the one suitcase. nothing familiar. I moved apartments in New York while I was here. I've never spent a night in my new apartment. It's sitting there.
Oh, Paul. God.
And my poor dog has forgotten me. But I want to say the experience that I've had has been astonishing, because what I no longer had access to was the who I thought I was in the same landscape in the same way. And it's been wonderful for me, on a very deep level.
Mm.
And I'm beginning to experience the teaching in a different way, because
Mm.
I'm participatory to it. I don't know why. Maybe this is, so I'm feeling fortunate and actually rather blessed through this experience. And I'm fortunate that I can work from where I am. And, there's a lot of things that I'm able to do.
Mm.
But my idea of who I am has been altered now.
Mm.
And that, I think, is the big one. It isn't to say that I'm not, a curmudgeon 58-year-old guy who, complains about not having a partner and, all the stuff that I normally do. That's still present. But I have to say, when I find myself resting in those places, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel, it's like, oh yeah, like I'm identifying with the mask I used to wear. I'm
Mm.
identifying with my idea of who I am, but that's not really who I am. Those are just things that I've known and experienced. It's a very funny thing.
Mm.
I don't know what I'm talking about now. I'm yammering. And, but I guess what I want to say is that the application of these teachings is experiential.
Mhm.
It's not theoretical. It's about how you be and how you know yourself in being. It's a funny life. I think we're all having a funny experience of life now.
That's an understatement.
No, it's because the rug got pulled out, and the guides were saying, and they were saying it in the book that you just read. They said, this was channeled a year ago. What you are about to encounter is unlike anything you've ever known, and you're only given the light for where you step next. You don't get to know. You don't get to know, and we want to
I
know.
hate that.
I know. Me too. I want to know. I want the security of the known. And this whole trilogy is about beyond the known. And what
All right.
happens when we step out of our expectations of who we are, what we are. Who am I without the marriage? Who am I without the job? Who am I without the things I believed myself to be, or my neighbors to be, or those people to be? All of these
Mm.
things are being challenged now.
Mm.
And hopefully, I want to say, hopefully, to benefit
Mm.
once we move through some of this.
Mm.
But what I hear from the guides sometimes, it's, when a seed breaks open and starts to push through the earth, it's messy. Growth isn't pleasant necessarily, and it's rarely elegant, I don't think. Maybe it's got its own innate beauty, but birth itself is, painful, bloody, process, and an
Yeah.
extraordinary thing.
Mm.
Not we want our convenience. We want things to be as we say they should be, with the ease that we perhaps have expected them. And I think this idea of moving beyond the known, to who we truly are, has to be inclusive of everybody. And that's the big pain in the ass about this teaching. You
Mm.
can't be the light and hold another in darkness.
Mm.
Can't do it
Mm.
anymore. We can't do it anymore.
I love the real, like, hey, I'm a hair club member. I've been
Yeah.
doing this stuff and it's hard. I'm telling you about this and it's hard. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm experiencing my own version of this and it's very hard. And what I was hoping we can do in the last few minutes, we've been talking to Paul Selig about his book Alchemy, Part Two, Beyond the Known, which is part of his trilogy. Thank you so much. In the last segment, I just want to ask you the last struggle that I think all of us are suffering. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, let me last do.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.